Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jenny with Sincerely Jen Patterns, and today we're going to be making the large Apothecary Tote. The pattern comes in handbag and tote size. So I already have all of my materials prepared. Fabric is cut out and interfaced. For my contrast, I'll be using a vinyl today. This vinyl is from mormino.com. And since I'm using vinyl, I did not interface those pieces. If your vinyl is very thin, you may still want to use interfacing. For my exterior, I have those pieces interfaced with one layer of woven interfacing. And then my lining, my main lining panels, I have interfaced with one layer of woven and a layer of Decoville light. And some of these, it's a waterproof canvas, but does not have like the plastic backing on it like we're familiar with. So some of the pocket lining pieces I did not interface because I feel like it's sturdy enough for that, because it is like a canvas. So if you notice that there isn't interfacing on some of my pieces, it's because without interfacing, it's about the same weight as a quilting cotton with one layer of woven interfacing. So let me know if you have any questions. This waterproof canvas is from Vala Home Creation. I'll tag everything in the description. This is from Vala. The exterior fabric is from Mary Beth Made It. This is from her round 3. So a pre-order for this opens on June 15th, 2022, and after that, she will have retail once the pre-order is filled. I did put a layer of Decoville Heavy on the exterior bottom panel, even though it's vinyl. And I already have some of my connectors prepared, and then we'll do the other ones on camera. So let me move, and I have all of my zippers ready. So my zipper pulls and zipper tape is all from mormino.com. So let me move all of this out of the way, and then we'll get started sewing. Okay, so the very first step, we're going to take an exterior back pocket panel and one lining back pocket panel. Place them right sides together, matching all edges, and then we're going to sew together along the top edge only using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Seam allowances change frequently in this pattern. So each step has listed what the seam allowance should be for that particular step, and I've underlined and made bold all of those seam allowances. So make sure to watch carefully because this one's only 3/8 of an inch. Several are 1/2 inch. Top stitching is typically 1/8 of an inch, but each step throughout the pattern is listed. For my sewing, I like to use a shorter stitch length of 3.5 millimeters or so. And then for top stitching, I typically switch to a longer stitch length. The longest stitch length that I have on my machine is 5 millimeter. And that is what I use most often if I'm using a thicker thread. So if I was using a thinner thread, I would probably use a little bit shorter stitch length, but I'm using Tech 70 from Saya Swag Bags, and with that thread I like to use a top stitching stitch length of 5 millimeter. So I just sewed together along the top raw edge, and I'm just going to press these now so that they're wrong sides together. Okay, and we're just going to top stitch along that seam using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now we have one remaining lining back panel. So with that lining back panel right side up, which really on this waterproof canvas. Either side could be the right side. So just choose whichever side you want if you are using this particular material. We want to place an exterior place an exterior pocket panel C right side down on top, and we're going to match that to the short edge. Exterior pocket panel C is a little bit longer, but it should match at the seam, where the seam is. So just make sure that it's approximately, or that it's centered. And then we'll use a 3/8 inch seam allowance for this. All right, now we're going to press the pocket panel C up away from the lining back pocket, and the seam allowance will be pressed up toward pocket panel C. Okay, and now we will top stitch using a 1/8 inch seam allowance through pocket panel C and the seam allowance. Just right along that seam. All right, now I'm going to place these panels on top of this lining, and I want to line it up in such a way that the top seam here lines up with the bottom of pocket panel C. And we're just going to clip the sides together, and then we're going to baste that together. Not yet. So before we baste it, first I'm going to line this up, and I'm going to pin most of the way down the sides, but not at the very bottom. Okay, I'm going to fold the exterior panel up and away from the lining panels, and I'm just going to pin these together or clip them together along the bottom straight edge. And now I'm going to sew this together using a 3/4 inch seam allowance. And the reason that I'm doing this is that we're going to use a larger seam allowance and then trim the bottom. And this way the pocket panels will not be in the bottom seam allowance, to keep that seam allowance from being too thick when you sew the bottom panel on. Alright, so we just want to trim this down to about 1/8 of an inch away from that line of stitching. And now we can go ahead and clip the rest of the sides together. And now we can baste down those sides using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you can just use your longest stitch length. So now for the side panels, you should have 2 that are cut this direction and 2 where the angle's on the other side. So we want 2 opposite panels. And I'm going to take the angled edge and place it this way. So the larger side is at the top and the skinnier side is at the bottom. This glitter vinyl is from mormino.com. I think I already said that. But if I didn't, now you know. I'm going to pin this together down the sides. Alright, and then we're just going to sew this together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, now I'm going to press the side panels away from the pocket panels. And I can't actually press this because it's vinyl. So I'm just going to kind of finger press. And then I'm just going to top stitch along the seam with my long stitch length using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. So being that this is vinyl, oftentimes you'll want to use a Teflon foot. I'm going to try my regular foot and see how it works. Alright, and it seems okay. If it was extra humid or hot, then it might be different and I would need my Teflon foot. So always test a scrap of your vinyl first before you just start to sew it using a regular foot, and then have it be kind of sticky, and then it'll make your whole sewing process difficult. Alright, so now we have the back panel is assembled. That looks pretty. So the back panel is assembled, and we can go ahead and set that aside, and we'll create the front panels. Alright, so this should be everything. So we should have a 9-inch zipper, and a 9.5-inch zipper, and an 8.5-inch zipper for the large size. Small size is listed in the pattern. So what I'm going to do is take my exterior pocket panel A, which is the biggest one that's at the bottom, and then I have my 9.5-inch length of zipper tape. I want to make sure that my zipper pull is closing toward the left. So when this is opening toward the right, closing toward the left. I want to place this right side down along that top edge, and I'm just going to clip this in place. And I'm just going to sew along that top edge using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you need to move your zipper pull out of the way, when you sew past it, then make sure you do that. Stop with your needle in the down position. Okay, and now you're going to take one of your lining pocket panel A pieces and place that right side down on top of the exterior pocket panel A with your zipper sandwiched in between. Go ahead and clip together along that top edge again. And this time I'm going to sew together using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Alright, now I'm going to press both the exterior and the lining away from the zipper so that they're wrong sides together. So they will be like this. Okay, once that's pressed, we're going to top stitch beneath the zipper using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. now we have pocket panel B. Yes, we're going to place this right side down, matching the long bottom edge to the top edge of the zipper. And here it's just important to make sure everything stays centered so that when it comes out, your sides are angled evenly. And there will be some trimming after everything is sewn together with some of the lining panels and stuff. So just try to keep everything nice and centered. You can mark centers on things as you go. I'm like an eyeballer, so I just eyeball it, hope for the best. I'm sewing this on using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Again, if you need to move your zipper out of the way, do so with your needle in the down position. All right, now I'm going to take the other lining pocket panel A, find the center, and I'm also finding the center of the zipper, so I'm going to place that on the back side, centered, and pin that in place. And here's where you'll start to notice that the pocket panels are not even with the sides. So you'll have this, and that's correct. That's how it should be right now. So we're just going to go ahead and sew this in place using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, now we're going to press pocket panel C up away from the zipper. All right, now we're going to top stitch along that seam through the seam allowance and the bottom of pocket panel C using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Alright, now we want to take 8 3/4 inch zipper and place it right side down with pocket panel C. If you're making the small bag, your zipper will be 7 3/4 of an inch length, 7 3/4 long. Okay, and I'm going to sew this in place using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, now we're going to take pocket panel lining B and place it right side down, lining up with the top of the front pocket panel B. Yeah? Yes. Okay, now we're going to sew this in place using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Adjust my zippers with the needle in the down position. Alright, now I'm going to flip this lining panel to the back and away from the zipper so that it will be like this, and I'm going to press that seam well. Alright, now that that's pressed, I'm going to top stitch using an 1/8 inch seam allowance beneath the zipper. Alright, now I'm going to take pocket panel C, place it right side down, matching the long bottom edge to the top edge of the zipper. And we're going to sew this in place using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. See what I mean about the seam allowance changing frequently? Okay, and now we're going to take the remaining pocket panel, we're going to take the remaining lining pocket panel B and place it right sides together with the lining pocket panel B that's already attached, which is this one. And we will line up the top of lining pocket panel B with the top of the zipper and the bottom of pocket panel C. We're going to clip that together, and we're going to sew this together using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Alright, now we're going to press pocket panel C up away from the zipper. Now we'll top stitch above the zipper through pocket panel C and the seam allowance using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, so this is what you have right now. Some of the sides do not line up, but that's fine. We're going to trim that down. So right now, what we want to do is fold exterior pocket panel A up and away from the lining. We're going to find lining pocket panel A and the other lining pocket panel A. So it should be this one and the one immediately behind it. We're going to fold the other lining pocket panels out of the way. So we just want those two, and honestly it might be easier to flip it this way. We're going to trim the bottoms of these two panels to be even. So I'm just trimming the longer one to be the same length as the shorter one. Alright, now we want to clip those two lining pocket panels together along the bottom, and we're going to sew that together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing with the other two lining panels and trim those so that they are the same length. And I'm just trimming the longer one to match the shorter one. And then I'll just go ahead and clip those together. And I'm going to sew together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance again. Alright, these seam allowances can be trimmed if you choose. It's not necessary because they should be out of the seam allowance. You know what? I'm going to trim them. Okay. So once you have both of those seams sewn, go ahead and trim the seam allowance down, and that way it will prevent the pockets from accidentally getting caught in the seam when you sew the bottom panel on. We want to keep that seam as thin as possible, so we don't want extra pockets, extra lining panels in there. Okay, now what we want to do is line this all up. We're going to trim the sides to be even. I'm going to go ahead and baste it first. Just straight from the top all the way down to the bottom. Just using like a 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, and with the zippers, not looking at the zippers, the fabric should pretty much be straight, the exterior pieces. So we should be able to just go ahead and trim the lining. And then what we're going to do is take the exterior back panel that's already assembled and check the height of this panel to make sure it matches. If your seam allowance got off a little bit in any of the zippers, it could change the height of this panel, and then it would not match the back and would not be the same height as the side panels. Alright, so here we have the back panel, and I'm just going to lay the front on the top and make sure it's the same height. So as long as your seam allowances were all accurate, this should be the same height. If it's not, go ahead and trim a little bit off of the bottom, or trim a little bit off of the top and bottom to make it even, whatever you choose, to make sure that it is the same height as the exterior back panels. All right, now we're going to take these side panels and proceed in the same manner that we did on the back with the back panel. So we're just going to match the angled side edges up with the angled edges of the front pockets. We want the larger part of the side panel to be at the top and the smaller part to be at the bottom. All right, we're going to sew this together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Alright, once that's sewn together, we'll press the side panels away from the main panel. Again, since this is vinyl, I'm not actually going to press it. I'll just kind of finger press, and then we're going to top stitch along that seam. The seam allowance should be at the back of the side panel, and we will use an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance for top stitching. Okay, the vinyl is a little bit sticky if I don't go super slow. So I will just do my top stitching very slow, and then I think when I do the final top stitching that I will use my Teflon foot. Oh boy, I'm super excited because this is really pretty together. This glitter vinyl has like purple, blue, and pink. And like depending on the way it hits the light, it looks different, like different colors, and it just goes with this cloud fabric so amazingly well. So cannot wait to get this finished. It's super cute already. All right, so unrolled 3 of my connectors, and then I have one more that I figured I would do on camera. So first what I did, the connectors are 2 by 2. I drew a line directly down the center on the back of each connector, and then I'm going to use double-sided tape, and I will just put a line of tape along each side of the line that I drew. And then I'm going to press the 2 side edges of the connector in to meet at that center line. So now your connector should be 1 inch by 2 inches. I'm going to top stitch down each side of the connector using a 1/8 inch seam allowance and my longer stitch length of 5. And then I'm going to slide a rectangle ring onto the connector and then bring the short raw edges together. And then I'm just going to base that in place using like a 1/4 inch, 1/8 of an inch, or 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, so on our back and front panels, we will want to take connectors and base them in place. The raw edges should align with the top raw edge of the bag, right inside of where the side panels attach. And I'm just going to base that in place using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And this part right here can get a little bit thick, so it is important before you choose to use a vinyl or something similar to know the limitations of your sewing machine. So if your machine will not go through thick materials, then you will not want to use a vinyl for these connectors. Maybe try using a seatbelt webbing or just cotton fabric. Interface, of course, but because we also will be sewing over these after we put the top panel on. So right now we have that. Let's do the same on our back panel. Okay. Now we would normally use 2 top panels that have Decoville light attached if you were using a woven fabric. Because I'm using vinyl, I chose to skip the Decoville light on these pieces just because I was afraid it might get a little too thick. You decide how you want to do that based on your fabric. Okay, so these are angled slightly on the side, so I was just checking to make sure that I have the angled part will be at the top. So I want to place the longer edge right sides together with the exterior back, and then the other one will be right sides together with the exterior front, and place it right side down. And it can get a little thick here where we sew through the connectors, so keep that in mind when you choose your fabric. Okay, so I'm going to sew this together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then be careful when you sew over the connectors to make sure that the rectangle rings are pulled down and not like scooted up in the seam allowance, because you do not want to sew over that. Thread just broke. So here we're going to press the top panel up away from everything else, and the connectors should also be facing up, and your seam allowance is facing down against the back of the side panels and top panel or pocket panel C. Here I'm not sure which foot I want to try to use to top stitch this. I'm just going to go for it. We want to top stitch this using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. And I'm just going to take my time. So here we're going to be sewing through the exterior, the top panel, and the connector. So that's the other like thicker part. And then if you choose, you can also add a rivet to this. And also, through some of these thicker parts, it can be helpful to hand crank your machine, which can help to prevent needles breaking and such. Oh wow, I'm very excited about this. This vinyl has like a little bit of a film or something on it. All right, we're going to repeat that process with the front panel now. same process. I'm folding the top panel up away from the side panels and the pocket panels. The connectors are pointing up. I have my longer top stitching stitch length, and I'm using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Alright, so I have a slight problem here. I just thought I was recording, and I wasn't. I sewed the bottom into the exterior. Oh my, I did a lot. Okay, so I guess I'll walk you through this, and I'm sorry that I can't show you. The front exterior and the back exterior were assembled. We're going to place those right sides together, match up the side edges, and then sew together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance down both of the sides. You want to make sure that you match the seam along the top panel on each side as best you can. And then I trimmed the seam allowance down to about 1/8 of an inch. I assembled and sewed on the crossbody connectors. So what I did, I had a piece of vinyl that's 3 inches long and 2 inches wide. Draw a line down the center, 3 inch length. Fold both of the raw 3 inch edges in to that line. And then fold the top back by about 1 inch and slide the D-ring into that fold, and then fold the bottom up by about 1/2 inch. And then I used double-sided tape to put that right here, just beneath where the side seam is. And then I sewed all the way around. So I just started at the top, down, across the bottom, back up the other side, and then back across here and back stitch once, just to make sure it's nice and secure. And then I repeated that to attach the other crossbody connector to the other side. Okay, and then after I did that, I marked the centers along the front and back exterior. The center is already marked on the side from the side seam. And then I took my exterior bottom panel, which I guess at least you'll get to see me sew on the lining bottom panel, which is the same process. And I marked centers here and on each end. Then I matched the centers of the front with the long side of the bottom panel, and the center of the back with the long side of the bottom panel. And then I matched the centers on each of the short ends. And then I sewed all the way around. I made sure that there were no wrinkles or anything weird. And then I went ahead and trimmed my seam allowance down to about 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch. Alright, so my exterior is fully assembled. And remember, this is the larger tote size, so that's why it looks pretty big. But I mean, this is definitely handbag size too if you prefer a bigger bag. So we're going to assemble the lining now. I'm so mad that I did all that without it filming. I think I accidentally hit the power button after I started it. So, okay, so now what we're going to do is on one of our interior zipper pockets on the wrong side, which I did not interface this because it's that canvas. So either side could be the wrong side. So whichever side I choose, but this would be on the wrong side. You want to, I have this fancy schmancy ruler here from mormino.com that is perfect for making a 10-inch box. But what you want to do is measure 1 inch down from the top of the lining panel and 1 inch in from each of the sides, and mark one line that is 10 inches long, and then 1/2 inch down from that line, and this is a heat erasable pen. 1/2 inch down from that line, you'll mark another line. And then draw a line at the end of each to make your complete box. And then we want to find the center of this and the center of the lining main, and make sure that you have the shorter, the top is less wide than the bottom, so make sure you have that situated in the right direction. And this does have Decoville light attached to the back. So we're just going to finger press to find the center, and we want to center this right sides together, and we want it to be 1 inch down from the top. So I'm going to just find the 1 inch mark and then place that pocket right there. All right, and then you want to go ahead and pin this in place. I'm going to take my chances and not pin it. We just want to sew all the way around this box using a shorter stitch length. So I have it at 3.5 millimeters. Make sure you back stitch at the start and stop. And then make sure when you get to the corner of the box you drew, stop with your needle in the down position and pivot. Sew up the side of the box. Do the same thing when you get to the top. And trim our threads. Alright, now here we're going to cut, and you can mark these lines out first, but after you've made thousands of bags, you can really just do it without marking. So I'm just going to cut a line directly down the center of this box. When I get about 1/2 inch away from the end, I'm going to stop cutting straight down the center, and I'm going to cut up to each of the corners. It's kind of like a Y. Like the letter Y. Okay, so it'll be just like that. There's a little bit of gunk from the Decoville. So there's like a little V at the end. I'll go and do that on the other side also. Alright, so now what I'm going to do, I have to go to my ironing board. I'm going to pull the lining pocket through to the wrong side of the lining main and press it flat so that we have a nice open box here. Alright, so that is pressed nice and flat. I want to get my 12-inch zipper. It should be just as long as that pocket is wide. And I'm going to take my double-sided tape and place a row along the top and bottom of the zipper. And I place it right along the edge because I don't want any of it to stick out in that opening. So if you're using like a number 3 zipper here, 1/4 inch wide tape will be too wide for the box and it will show in the opening. Alright, so we want to make sure that we get our zipper situated so that it's opening, or closing, I'm sorry, to the left, which is the way I like to put all of my zippers. I think what's more important, not necessarily if you have it closing to the left or the right, is that you just have them all going the same direction. So if you prefer it the other way, then by all means, put them that way. I think it's personal preference. Maybe whether you're right-handed or left-handed, or however you like your zippers, just do what you like. I mean, that's the beauty of us being able to sew our own bags, is that we can have them however we want. So I'm just making sure that this is centered in that hole. Alright, so look at it from the right side and make sure it looks good. Make any adjustments that you think you might need to make now before you sew it in place. Now I'm just going to sew this in place starting at the bottom. I always like to start sewing at the bottom left hand side. And then I use my longer stitch length. And I think I actually might update the pattern to have a rectangle cut out of the deco. That would make it easier to install the zipper. So I think that I will be adding that to the pattern. So we've got that sewn on. Now we want to take our other zipper pocket panel and place it right sides together with the one attached. And then we're just going to clip around the sides and the top of the zipper panels. We're going to leave the bottom open. And you may find that the interior zipper panel that's attached to the bag right now seems a little bit shorter, and I think that's because sometimes it gets pulled up into the zipper a little bit, and that's fine. It's usually along the top, and I just make sure that the bottom opening part matches up. The sides should match up, and then the top will just get absorbed into the seam allowance, so it's not a big deal. And you can make your seam allowance bigger if you needed to. It's just an interior zipper pocket. It's not anything that really has to be precise. And I'm just using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And the most important thing here is just that you back stitch at the start and stop so that your stitches don't rip out when you turn your bag right side out. I'm just going to trim these seam allowances down. Probably not absolutely necessary, but when the seam allowance is trimmed, at least along the bottom, I find it easier to close the pocket up when I'm done. Alright, so you should have 4 zipper panels. 2 of them are interfaced, 2 of them are not. If you really like them all to be interfaced, you could do that. I try to minimize bulk where possible. So I'm just going to take my pen and mark a line 1 inch in from the edge on each of the panels. 1 inch in from the short edge, I should say. Alright, and the reason I do this is that it just makes it easier to fold the end under by 1/2 inch. Because folding it under by 1/2 inch would mean that I'm going to fold it to that 1 mark line. So I'll fold all of these to the line that I marked, and then it's folded under by 1/2 inch. So I'm going to go to my ironing board so that I can press these, and I'll be right back. Alright, all of my zipper panels have been pressed. So now I'm going to take one of the interfaced panels, place it right side up, and then I'm going to take my 15-inch zipper I just want to separate the end of the zipper, and I'm going to take each side and I'm going to fold it at a 90-degree angle and fold the zipper tape up so that it's straight beneath the curve. So if you see how I did that, it's just like that. And then you can go ahead and baste this. And then you'll repeat that to do the other side. And I'm just folding it so that the side is even with the side of the zipper. The back should be at an angle like this. All right, so now I'm going to place my zipper right side down on the right side of an interfaced zipper panel. The edge of my teeth where it's folded back, I want that to be pretty much lined up with that 1/2 inch mark, or the 1/2 inch that's folded to the back. I'm just going to clip this in place. And this is easier for me if my zipper is unzipped. Just be careful not to pull the zipper pull off the end. Although if you did, you could get it back on. And we're going to clip this all the way down to the bottom of the zipper panel. All right, now we want to go ahead and sew this in place using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, and now I'm going to take one of the uninterfaced zipper panels and place it right sides together with the zipper sandwiched in between. That train seems very loud tonight. And I'm just going to clip together all along the edges, or all along the raw edge where the zipper is attached. Okay, now I'm going to sew this together using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And you can start sewing right at the end. gonna sew my fingers together. And ideally you should back stitch, but I'm pretty far in now, so I'm not going to. I think it'll be okay. Apparently when it's past my bedtime, I get a heavy foot. Okay, so now we want to go press both of these zipper panels away from the zipper and wrong sides together. Okay, so once those zipper panels are pressed wrong sides together, we're just going to place a few clips on here to hold them together, and then we're going to sew all the way around the zipper panels using an 1/8 inch seam allowance, and then I'll use a 1/4 inch seam allowance to baste the open edge closed. Okay, so one zipper panel is attached, and then we'll go ahead and repeat all of that to attach the other zipper panel. I'm afraid to stop the video again at this point and accidentally not film part of it. But I really would like to go to bed, I think. It's about 11 o'clock, and I have to work tomorrow, so I will be up very early. All right, now we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance to sew this on. Now we're going to place these right sides together. I'll sew with that side up, and we'll see how that works. feel like it kind of, the uninterfaced canvas seems to stretch just a tiny bit when I sew it. So I think it might do a little better if it's on the bottom. So this, we're going to use a 3/8 inch seam allowance here. Okay, now I'm going to press those two zipper panels away from each other. All right, now we'll go ahead and clip the raw edge closed. And we'll go ahead and top stitch all the way around this side, also using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, now the zipper tab, I already pre-folded. You're going to draw a line down the center of the vertical length of the zipper tab. Fold both of the long raw edges into the center crease and press well. And then fold each of the short ends toward the back by about 1/2 inch. Excuse me. And then fold that in half and press that well. And then all of the raw edges are enclosed inside. You'll just go ahead and slip this onto your zipper. And then we'll just sew all the way around the zipper tab. All right, now we're going to take our lining panel and we want to find the center of the zipper panel. I'll just go ahead and mark both sides, the center, and I just put a tiny little snip. This seam allowance will be 1/2 inch, so as long as your snip does not go farther than 1/4 inch or so, it should be good. I really should just use real scissors because it's not the easiest to snip into fabric with these tiny little snips. All right, and then to find the center along the top of the lining main, and I'm going to go ahead and mark the center of the bottom as well right now because I will need that when I attach the bottom main or the bottom panel. All right, so I want this to be right side up. Zippers are both going the same direction. And I'm just going to clip this in place, and then we're going to baste it using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And now I'm going to take one of my remaining top panels, and I'm going to place the bottom edge, which is longer, right sides together with the top edge of the lining main. All right, and I'm going to sew that together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then we're going to press the top panel away from the lining main, and I'm going to top stitch this using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. I feel like my bobbin thread could run out at any moment. think I'm done for the night. I need to go to bed. So what's going to happen next is that we're going to attach the other side of this to the other lining main and the other top panel. Then we will sew the sides together using a 5/8 inch seam allowance. It'll be 1/2 inch at the top, 5/8 as you go down, and then we'll attach the bottom main. No, just the bottom panel. Also using a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Then what else? Then we sew the exterior and lining together and attach the handles, make and attach the handles, and assemble the crossbody strap. So we are close, but I need to go to bed. So here we go. I started this video a whole weekend ago, and now I'm finally going to finish it. So I need the other lining main. All right, so now we're going to attach the zipper panel to the other lining main panel. I'm going to first find the center along the top edge. And I'm going to actually mark the center along the bottom edge as well. And I don't remember, I did mark the center on the bottom of the other bottom. Nope, lining main. All right. So I'm going to match the center of the zipper panel up with the center of my lining main. I'm going to clip that in place. All right, and now I'm going to sew that together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Kind of a basting stitch. And my sewing machine's not on. Summer is finally in full swing here, and I do not have an air conditioner in my sewing room. Or it's not on the central air that the rest of the house is on. So every year I put a window air conditioner in, and I think it's about time to do that because it's getting hot in here. I have a little fan on, but it only does so much. Okay, so now you want to find the longer edge of your top panel and match that up right sides together with the top of the lining main. We're sandwiching the zipper panel in between. And really you can do this in one step where you sew the top panel to the bottom panel and the zipper panel all in one step, where I would just clip the zipper panel in place, and then with it still clipped in place, place the top panel over it and then sew that down. And you just sew it all together at one time using 1/2 inch seam allowance. This just helps to make sure that things don't move on you to do it in separate steps like that, but I don't always do it like that. Alright, so here we're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now we'll go ahead and press the top panel up away from the lining main. I'm going to kind of roll these so I can fit it here, and then we're going to top stitch that using a 1/8 inch seam allowance through the top panel and the seam allowance that's on the back. And I'm switching back to my longest stitch length, which is 5mm on my sewing machine. Okay, now I think this is the part that was cut off when we did the exterior, so right now I'm going to match the side seams, or match the sides of the lining. So I'm matching the seam of the top panel to the bottom, or to the lining main, to make sure that that's even. And then we'll go ahead and match the rest of the side seams. So I did make sure that my zipper tab is folded back out of the way. You don't want to accidentally sew through that. And I'm sorry about all the background noise, that people are mowing lawns and everything, but like I said, it's summer. And it's a Saturday. And I'm just doing this in my house, so I don't have like a soundproof studio or anything. That would be nice though. Okay, I'm just gonna match. I'm gonna do both sides now. I just unzip the zipper part way so that it's out of my way. Now we're going to sew the sides together. We're going to start at the top using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then after I get down past like the top panel or so, I'm going to gradually increase my seam allowance to about 5/8 of an inch, just so that the lining will fit nicely inside of the exterior without being baggy. I mean, it shouldn't be baggy anyway, since it has the Decoville light on it, but that will just help it to fit nicer inside of the exterior. I know I'm weird about this, but I'm flipping my clips over because I like them to be the right way, because the back side is flat, so they just glide smoother along the bed of the sewing machine, and I want to sew from top down to bottom. So again, I'm just starting at 1/2 inch seam allowance here at the top. And then once I get past that top panel, I'm just going to gradually increase my seam allowance to about 5/8 of an inch. Now we're going to go ahead and trim this seam allowance down to about 1/8 of an inch. Alright, and now we have the lining bottom panel. So I'm going to mark the centers, and you can either use your pattern piece or just go ahead and fold it. Okay, now I'm going to unzip. I'm going to unzip the zippers now so that I don't forget to later. And I'm unzipping the main zipper at the top, and also the zipper on the zipper pocket. So alright, I got plenty of clips out. First, I'm just going to place the bottom panel right sides together with one of the lining main panels, and I'm matching up that center mark, and I'm just going to clip that in place. And then I'm going to place a couple more clips on either side of the center mark. Oh man, I'm like literally roasting in here. It's so hot. I don't know, I can't even think of where my air conditioner is. It might be out in the garage. My husband's not home, so maybe I'll have to do it myself. Alright, so I might match the center on this side, and then I'm just clipping to either side of the center. Now my dog's barking. Alright, and now we're just going to match the centers on the short end of the bottom panel to the side seam. And here's the part where you need to remember again that we're not matching up at the edge, but at the seam line. So here it's actually 5/8 of an inch in. So as you're fitting it together, it's going to seem like it doesn't fit. But if you line up the seam line, then it's fine. So there may be some wrinkles around the edges, as you can see here. But down here where I'm going to sew, there are no wrinkles. Hopefully that makes sense. I think it's one of those things that you just get used to after sewing bags for a while. And I don't even think about it now. Like when I'm not trying to explain what I'm doing. And I'm just matching up the center on the other short side. hopefully tomorrow I can film the video for the small. We'll see how long this takes me. Right now it's June 11th. So we'll see how long it takes me to actually release the pattern from this point. My goodness. In my dog's opinion, nobody else should ever be outside on our sidewalk or anywhere else nearby. Alright, I'm just putting my zipper foot on to sew the bottom panel in place. Okay, make sure that your interior zipper pocket's out of the way. It should not get in the way because it's not that long, but... Alright, and then we're sewing the bottom panel to the lining in place using a 5/8 inch seam allowance. I probably should have said before I trim the seam allowance, I make sure that everything looks good, that I don't have any folds or anything sewn into that seam around the bottom panel. So it does look nice. So that's why I went ahead and trimmed the seam allowance. I'm thinking inside my head and not talking out loud. So right now we want to turn the lining right side out. I was going to press the lining, but I think I'll wait until I'm done since I'm just about to get it all wrinkly again. And I notice sometimes that with Decovil Light, you'll get some wrinkles that you can't iron out. At least this way it's on the lining and not the exterior. So they really aren't going to be noticeable. But you still get that same structure from the Decovil Light. Alright, so I'm going to place my lining inside of my exterior. I want the zipper panel side to be up against the side of the bag that has the back slip pocket, not the side with the zippers. So just get that all in there. Make sure that the end of your zipper is pushed down inside. You don't want to accidentally sew over your zipper tab. And then I'm just matching up first the side seams. And if you fold the side seams one in either direction like this, they'll nest together nicely. And then I'll place a clip there and then a couple on either side of that. And then I'll nest the seams on the other side as well. So this is one area where it can get a little bit thick if you're using vinyl. So just make sure that whatever materials you are using, that your sewing machine can handle them. This vinyl is, I think, more domestic friendly than some other vinyls I've used. Definitely more domestic friendly than glitter marine vinyl. And this again is from moremeknow.com. I'm actually starving. No, I'm not starving. I'm hungry. It's lunchtime. Now we're just going to go ahead and sew the lining and exterior together all the way around the top using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I did just put on my Teflon foot just to make sure that it glides easier over the vinyl, because it has been a little bit sticky. And that could be partially due to the fact that it's 8 million degrees in my sewing room right now. Don't be afraid to squish your bag to get it to do what you need it to do. Threads. I'm trying to decide if I want to trim the seam allowance around the top of the bag. Motherfucker. This will be like my worst video ever. Alright, so I'm not going to trim that seam allowance. Just because I feel like the top seam looks nicer when it's not trimmed. If you feel that you need to trim it, go ahead. You could definitely trim it down to about 1/8 of an inch and use a 1/4 inch seam allowance when you top stitch the finished bag, and then it may be easier. Let me see how I want to do this. So I'm going to try to pull the exterior out of the lining first. So I didn't pay attention to what the name of this vinyl is, and I think somebody said it's called Blurple, which is like blue purple, I guess, and it definitely is that. Alright, so I'm just pressing out the bottom seam with my fingers. I'm going to push the lining down inside of the exterior. And I do top stitch my bags inside out, so I'll still have to turn it back inside out after this, but one thing at a time. This is where it comes in handy to have either a removable, or what's it called? A removable arm? Swing arm? I don't know. On a domestic machine where you take the bottom piece off and you can put it, or put whatever on there. That, or like a cylinder arm sewing machine would be handy. Alright, so I've got the whole lining pushed down inside of the exterior, and we have this. And now I'm going to turn it inside out so that I can top stitch all the way around here. I'm probably going to, because it's 2 layers of vinyl, I'm going to kind of roll it. I can't press it. So I'm going to kind of roll it between my fingers to make sure it's pushed out really nicely, and then probably place some clips on it to hold it in place. Okay, so I have the whole exterior pushed down inside of the lining, and I placed clips around the top to keep my seam nice, so that I can top stitch it. If you are not using vinyl, obviously you would iron this, but I can't do that. So alright, I like to start in an area that's kind of maybe off to the side a little bit, and I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance to top stitch, just because I think it's easier sometimes. Back stitch a couple stitches, and then I'm just going to sew all the way around, nice and slowly, removing the clips as I go, and making sure that my seam stays nice and even along the top. Kind of pull the connectors back when you top stitch near them. most important thing here is just to be patient. Take your time. Now take your time going over the side seams because it is thick. So you may want to hand crank your machine and make sure that you don't get any skipped stitches, because sometimes you can skip stitches pretty easily in the thick areas. Trim our seam allowances, or trim our threads off. Okay, now let's turn the bag right side out. Alright, so I just pressed the raw edges of the interior zipper pocket inside by about 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch. It doesn't really matter how far you push them inside, just as long as it's even, and then press it nice and flat. And then I'm just going to place some clips on the pocket, and then we'll just top stitch right along the folded edges. Alright, and then we're just going to top stitch that closed using probably about 1/8 inch seam allowance. Alright, go ahead and tuck the pocket down inside. Okay, zip my zipper. I'm going to press my handles. I already sewed this one together. We'll go ahead and do this one together. Yeah. All right, so I am taking my ruler. The strap is cut to 4 inches wide, so I'm going to, or I'm sorry, the handle. Draw a line down the center, so 2 inches in from the raw edge. Didn't even make a mark. Use a regular pen. Let me tell you, sewing videos are not fun when it's really hot. Okay. Okay, so I have a line directly down the center. I'm going to take my double-sided tape and put a section of that down each side of the line that I drew. Okay, so we'll go ahead and fold the edge of this almost into the line. If I fold it all the way into the line, then it won't lay as flat. I don't know if that makes sense. It gets bunchy, I guess, in the center when you fold the other side in. So I fold it like almost to the center. All right, now one more line of tape. All right, now I'm going to top stitch along each side of this using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I start with the open side, so where the two folded edges come together. And I'm using my 5mm stitch length. now I'm going to attach the straps to my bag using rivets. These are 9mm rivets from Emmeline Bags. And I have a handy little rivet guide that I received from Mary Beth Made It. So, or you can measure with a ruler to find your placement marks. So usually I think, and I guess I can never remember what my measurements would be, and that's why I thought it would be a good idea to buy the strap guide. So I think I would usually measure about 1/2 inch up and then about 2.5 inches and make my marks and punch my holes. But instead I'm going to use this rivet guide, and alright, go ahead and mark in, I'm going to use the A and the C spot for my straps. So find whatever the measurements are that you like and mark those. Or you can put your straps, your handles onto the bag by sewing them, which is the instructions that are given in the pattern. You would press one end under by 1/2 inch and then press that same side under by another inch, so the raw end is enclosed, and then you would just sew that onto the bag. So I'm just going to punch holes. I think if you're in the market for a nice rivet press, that a lot of people recommend cam snaps, and that's not where mine came from, but I think there are issues with the one that I have now that people have. I'm not sure. Mine personally is fine, but I think cam snaps is like the #1 recommended rivet press. And you can also get dies for your rivet press to punch the holes, or maybe a second rivet press for hole punching would be a good idea. Oh, and actually, Cam Snap sells a pink one, so that's nice. Alright, so once my handle is situated the way that I want it to be, just poke a rivet through the front of the strap and then through the back. I think I punched my holes a little too small. I switched the size of my punch for the other strap, but it's a little tight on this one. So I've got the rivets on the front. Now let's go ahead and get them on the other handle. Yeah, it definitely makes a difference when you use the right size punch. Okay, bag is done. We just need to do the crossbody strap, which I actually already sewed. So it's assembled in the same way as the handles. So I didn't see a need to film the whole process. You just fold it in half or mark a line down the center vertically. Press both sides into the center seam. And then fold that in half again, so it's 4 layers thick with the raw edges enclosed in the center. So we will go ahead and on video attach the hardware. So first thing is that we're going to put the raw one edge over the center bar of the slider like this. You don't want any raw edges to be exposed, so I'm going to fold that edge under as such. So it's like this. You've got a folded edge here and the raw edge is under the center. I'm going to, you know what, I want to switch my presser foot back out actually. So I believe the video for the small bag, I'm going to use all woven fabrics, I think. So it should be what is called for in the pattern, and we'll see how that is. All right. So we're just going to go ahead and sew as close to the hardware as I can across the handle, and then back stitch, and then go across again, and then we'll repeat this one more time close to the fold. And you could sew a box there also if you wanted to. Okay, so now you have this. We'll go ahead and slide one of our swivels onto the other end. And you want it to be this way so that the fabric is going over your connector right now. We're going to slide the other end of the strap over the center bar of the connector. And now we have this. So here's our connector. Here is our clip. Make sure that this is adjustable. Okay, so as long as that adjusts, you've done it correctly. And then you can go ahead and slide the other end of your swivel clip onto the strap and make sure that this is the back side of your strap. It has this on it, so make sure that you're folding this part to the back as well. And I'm just going to press that under one more time, and then I'll go ahead and top stitch. One time as close to the strap as possible, or as close to the hardware as possible. And then one more time as close to the fold as possible. All right, and our crossbody strap is finished. And our whole bag is finished. So here's your completed bag. You can just go ahead and put the crossbody strap on. And then take it off if you don't want to carry it crossbody. And there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you make this pattern, I would love it if you would either share it on Instagram and tag me at Sincerely Jen Patterns. This is the Apothecary bag in large size, and there will also be an Apothecary bag in the small size. So if you've watched this video, go ahead and check out the other one, and let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.